They said it was just old age. But the truth behind Brian Wilson's death is way darker, and barely anyone is talking about it. You probably know Brian Wilson as the genius behind the Beach Boys, the man who changed pop music forever. Songs like God Only Knows and Wouldn't It Be Nice didn't just top charts, they became part of the soundtrack of America. But behind the sunshine vibes and California surfboards was a life filled with pain, betrayal, and secrets. And now that he's gone, some of the most shocking truths are finally starting to come out. This isn't just another celebrity obituary. This is the part they never wanted you to know. For years, fans worried about Brian Wilson's health. He had struggled with mental illness since the 1960s. He rarely performed live. He vanished from the spotlight more than once. But when the news broke that he had died, many people, even those close to him, were stunned. It wasn't just the fact that he had passed. It was how it happened, and what had been happening in the months leading up to it. The official statement was brief. It sounded peaceful. Brian Wilson passed away surrounded by loved ones. But then a few key details started to leak, and suddenly everything changed. Let's go back, not to the 1960s, but to just a few months before Brian died. In early 2025, people noticed something strange. Brian had completely stopped making public appearances. Not that he was constantly in the public eye, but even the occasional Instagram post or fan message stopped cold. His longtime publicist, Gene Sievers, said Brian was resting, but people who were close to him, including a few former bandmates, didn't buy it. Sources began whispering that Brian's health had taken a serious downturn. He was no longer lucid all the time. He couldn't play the piano anymore, not because of his hands, but because he couldn't remember the songs. Some claimed he didn't even recognize some family members. But that's not even the most shocking part. In February, a court in California quietly placed Brian under a conservatorship, the same legal arrangement that Britney Spears had been trapped under for over a decade. This was huge. A music legend, someone who had literally written and produced some of the most iconic songs in history, was suddenly declared legally unable to care for himself. Why? The court documents stated that Brian was suffering from a major neurocognitive disorder. That's legal speak for something like late-stage dementia or Alzheimer's. It meant he couldn't manage his own finances, couldn't make legal decisions, couldn't even decide who could visit him. And get this, his wife Melinda, who had been by his side for nearly 30 years, had just died a month earlier. Let that sink in. Brian Wilson, one of the greatest musical minds ever, had just lost his wife, was quietly placed under conservatorship, and then faded from public view, completely. Then came the silence. No statements, no photos, no updates. Until the news finally broke, Brian had died, and the music world went numb. But here's where it gets even weirder. Just hours after the death announcement, fans started digging, and what they found raised even more questions. The first red flag? No official cause of death was released. Not immediately, not even days later. That's unusual for a public figure, especially someone as legendary as Brian Wilson. Second, the people managing his estate now weren't his children, not even his brother or remaining family members. It was a group of people named in the conservatorship, essentially a legal team and some business associates. This group now had full control over his music, his image, and most importantly, his legacy. Fans started asking, was Brian really surrounded by loved ones when he died? Or was he just another isolated celebrity at the mercy of lawyers and contracts? Even more disturbing, a former Beach Boys collaborator, who asked not to be named, told a music journalist that Brian hadn't been himself in over a year. That same source claimed Brian had been pushed to keep working, despite not wanting to. Another source said, quote, "He was a money machine. Even sick, even confused. They still had plans for him. And now that he's gone, the money machine keeps going." Streaming numbers shot up overnight. Merch sales exploded. And the Beach Boys estate announced a new Greatest Hits vinyl set, just days after the news broke. Some fans are calling it a cash grab. Others are calling it exploitation. But no matter how you see it, one thing's clear. Brian's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was the end of a very, very complicated story. Brian Wilson lived a life most people couldn't even imagine. Fame, fortune, genius, and at the same time, deep trauma, mental illness, and periods of heartbreaking isolation. The Beach Boys were the sound of sunshine, but Brian's life wasn't sunshine. It was storms. It was constant battles with his own mind, with his family, with the music industry, and in the end, maybe even with the people closest to him. His story isn't just about the music. It's about how we treat artists who give everything they have, until there's nothing left to give. Did Brian die peacefully? Maybe. But what led up to it doesn't feel peaceful.
It's how we failed to protect him while he was still here. Make sure you click like and subscribe button so you won't miss the most updated celebrity news.